The smell of espresso and leather had become as familiar to Isadora Thorne as breathing. 2 years working as Dominic Salvatore's personal secretary, and she could identify the exact moment he entered a room by the subtle shift in air pressure, the way conversations died mid-sentence, the electric tension that preceded him like a storm announcing its arrival. She adjusted the stack of contracts on her desk fingers, smoothing non-existent wrinkles from papers already perfectly organized. 7:47 in the morning, which meant Dominic would arrive in exactly 13 minutes. He was nothing if not precise, a quality extending to every aspect of his life, from the way he took his coffee. 3 shots of espresso with a single sugar cube dissolved slowly to the specific angle at which documents should be placed on his desk for review. Her workspace sat just outside his office on the 42nd floor of Salvatore Tower, a glass and steel monument to legitimate business that housed considerably less legitimate operations on its upper floors. She'd learned not to ask questions about the men in expensive suits who arrived after hours about the locked filing cabinets. She wasn't given keys to about the phone calls Dominic took behind closed doors in rapid Italian that made his jaw tighten and his eyes go cold. She'd learned to be invisible when necessary and indispensable when required. The memories crashed over her without warning, pulling her into moments she'd tried desperately to catalog and forget simultaneously. 2 years ago. Navy dress cream folder clutched against her chest. The interview that changed everything. Dominic had sat behind that massive mahogany desk, dark eyes tracking her every movement as she crossed the floor. Most people looked away from him after a few seconds, intimidated by the intensity the danger coiled beneath expensive tailoring. She'd held his gaze. "Tell me why you want this position, Miss Thorne." "I need a job that challenges me. Your previous 3 secretaries lasted an average of 4 months. That tells me you demand excellence. I prefer to work for someone with standards." Something flickered in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. The interview stretched 45 minutes when most barely reached 10. When he'd finally stood extending his hand across the desk, his grip had been warm and firm. "You start Monday, Miss Thorne." She'd walked out of that office knowing her life had fundamentally shifted, though she couldn't have articulated how. 18 months ago. Winter storm office empty, except for the 2 of them working past midnight on the Riverside acquisition. She'd been shivering in her thin cardigan when Dominic emerged from his office suit jacket in hand. No words, just the weight of expensive fabric settling over her shoulders, still warm from his body, carrying the scent of his cologne, something dark and woody that made her stomach flutter traitorously. He'd returned to his office without acknowledgement, leaving her wrapped in fabric that felt like an embrace. 1 year ago. The incident with Richard Castellano. The client meeting had started professionally enough. Contracts, negotiations, Issa taking notes in the corner. Then Castellano's hand on her knee under the table, his fingers sliding higher despite her subtle attempts to shift away. The whispered comment about pretty secretaries and after-hours services. She'd frozen trained professional smile locked in place, heart hammering. Dominic had gone perfectly, terrifyingly still. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees in the space of a breath. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of barely leashed violence. "Did he touch you?" 3 words. Quiet. Lethal. Castellano had paled, stammering excuses. Dominic stood with the fluid grace of a predator, walked around the conference table, and gripped Castellano's shoulder hard enough that the man winced. "You have 10 seconds to leave this building. If I ever hear you've spoken to Miss Thorne again," spoken about her, looked in her direction, "I'll make sure it's the last mistake you make. Am I clear?" Castellano fled. The contract worth $12 million died with his exit. Later, after the office emptied, Dominic had appeared at her desk, his knuckles white where they gripped the edge of her workspace. "Did he hurt you?" She'd shaken her head, throat too tight for words. "If anyone ever—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "You tell me immediately." 6 months ago. Her 26th birthday. She'd mentioned it to no one, preferred to let the day pass unmarked and unremarked. Yet when she'd arrived at her apartment that evening, a package waited. Plain brown paper, no card. Inside, a first edition of The Great Gatsby. She'd referenced it once months earlier in passing conversation about favorite books. He'd remembered. More than remembered, he'd tracked down a pristine copy worth thousands. She'd held that book and cried, knowing exactly who'd sent it, knowing she was falling for a man completely beyond her reach. The elevator chimed, yanking her from memories into the present moment that always felt suspended, fragile. Dominic emerged, flanked by Kane and two other guards whose names she'd never learned. He wore a charcoal suit tailored to perfection in Milan or maybe Manhattan, she'd never asked, though she'd memorized every line of how fabric draped across his shoulders. Dark hair swept back from a face carved from marble and shadow, all sharp angles and aristocratic lines. Eyes so dark they appeared black in certain lights, though she knew if you looked close enough, looked long enough, you'd see flecks of amber near the iris. 35 years old, 6'2", moved like violence wrapped in silk. "Buongiorno, Miss Thorne." His Italian accent wrapped around her name in a way that made her stomach flutter traitorously. She stood smoothing down her pencil skirt, hyper-aware of how his gaze traveled over her for the briefest moment before returning to her face. Professional. Always professional, this careful dance they'd perfected. "Good morning, Mr. Salvatore. Any urgent matters requiring immediate attention?" She handed him the leather portfolio she'd prepared. Inside, summaries of overnight developments, priority messages, his schedule adjusted for a meeting that had run long yesterday. The Moretti family requested a meeting this afternoon. The mayor's office called twice last evening. Quarterly reports from the Brooklyn operations are ready for your review. Something flickered in his expression at the mention of the Morettis, his primary rivals in the intricate power structure controlling New York's underworld. The flicker vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Cancel the Moretti meeting. Tell them I'm unavailable." His voice carried that edge of dismissal that meant the subject was closed, decided, final. "Your father called from the estate. He indicated it was important." Dominic's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She'd learned to read these micro-expressions over 2 years of careful observation. "I'll return his call later. Hold all other calls until I say otherwise." He disappeared into his office, and she released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Kane lingered, his expression knowing in a way that made heat creep up her neck. The head of security had worked for the Salvatore family for 15 years, had probably seen everything, knew everything. "You should be careful, Miss Thorne." His accented English carried a note of something between warning and sympathy. "The boss doesn't notice much outside business. But when he does notice something..." He trailed off meaningfully. "I don't know what you mean." She kept her voice steady despite the way her heart hammered against her ribs. Kane smiled, the expression almost fond. "Of course you don't." The morning passed in its usual rhythm. Calls, emails, the careful choreography of managing Dominic's schedule. She was exceptional at her job, anticipated his needs before he voiced them, handled problems before they reached his desk, maintained the fiction that she was merely an efficient employee rather than a woman who lay awake at night thinking about the way his hands looked when he signed documents strong and elegant and completely off limits. At 11:30, her personal cell phone buzzed. Brett Callahan's name flashed across the screen. They'd attended Columbia together, stayed in loose contact through the years. Corporate lawyer, merger and acquisition specialist, handsome in that all-American way with sandy hair and an easy smile. He'd made his interest clear over the past few months, asked her out 3 times. She'd deflected each time with vague excuses about work being hectic. "Issa, it's Brett. I'm in the neighborhood. Any chance you're free for lunch? There's this great place in Little Italy, Antonio's Bistro, 12:30. She should say no, should maintain the professional boundaries she'd worked so hard to establish. But maybe lunch with Brett was exactly what she needed, a reminder that the world existed beyond Dominic Salvatore's gravitational pull, that normal men with normal lives found her attractive, that she could build something safe and uncomplicated if she just tried. "Antonio's at 12:30. I'll see you there." She ended the call and glanced toward Dominic's office. The door stood slightly ajar. Through the gap she could see him at his desk, head bent over documents, completely absorbed. This was fine. Lunch with a friend. Nothing wrong with that. She gathered her purse and coat, called toward Dominic's half-open door with forced casualness. "I'm taking my lunch hour, Mr. Salvatore." The response came after a beat too long. Isadora, her first name. He rarely used it, preferring the professional distance of Miss Thorne. The sound of it in his voice made something in her chest tighten. She turned back, found him standing in his doorway, one hand braced against the frame. His expression unreadable. "Where are you going?" The question was odd enough that she hesitated. "Antonio's Bistro, the Italian place in Little Italy." "Alone." Something in his tone made her pulse spike, a quality she couldn't quite identify, sharp-focused, dangerous. "I'm meeting someone." She watched the word land, watched something dark and possessive flash through his eyes before his expression went carefully blank. "Someone." He repeated the word flatly, each syllable weighted. "A friend from college. I'll be back by 1." She forced herself to turn to walk toward the elevator with measured steps, feeling his gaze burning into her back like a physical touch. The elevator doors closed and she sagged against the wall, heart racing. What was that? That edge in his voice, that intensity in his eyes. She pushed the thoughts away. This was healthy, normal. Lunch with Brett would remind her of reality, pull her back from the dangerous fantasy she'd been constructing around a man who saw her as nothing more than exceptional administrative support. Antonio's Bistro occupied a corner building in Little Italy. Red brick and iron fire escapes the kind of place that had been family-owned for 3 generations. She arrived at 12:35, found Brett already seated at a table near the window. He stood as she approached, smile warm and genuine. "Isa, you look beautiful." "Thank you." She slid into the booth across from him, accepted the menu with a smile that felt only slightly forced. "Sorry I'm late. Work was hectic this morning." "Your mysterious job that you never talk about." He leaned back, studying her with friendly curiosity. "One of these days you're going to tell me what you actually do." "Executive assistant, very boring corporate work." Technically true, if woefully incomplete. They ordered, she chose pasta primavera, he opted for chicken parmesan, and Brett launched into a story about his latest case, some tech merger involving companies she'd never heard of. He was attractive, successful, kind, everything a reasonable woman should want. She felt absolutely nothing beyond mild friendship. Because her stupid, traitorous heart had decided to fixate on a man who was dangerous, emotionally unavailable, and completely inappropriate in every conceivable way. Brett was mid-sentence, something about stock options and shareholder agreements, when she felt it, that shift in the air, that electric charge that meant her blood ran cold. Dominic Salvatore stood at the entrance of Antonio's Bistro, flanked by Kane and another guard, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He'd removed his suit jacket, white shirt rolled to his elbows, and there was something almost feral in his expression as his gaze moved from her to Brett and back again. The restaurant didn't go silent. People didn't recognize him immediately, not here in the tourist-heavy lunch crowd. But those who knew, those who understood the weight of the Salvatore name, shifted in their seats and found sudden interest in their plates. "Dominic." She breathed his first name too quietly for Brett to hear over the ambient noise. But Dominic heard. Somehow, across the crowded space, Dominic heard her whisper, and he moved. He crossed the restaurant in long strides, ignoring the way conversations faltered and heads turned. People recognized danger when it walked past their tables, even if they couldn't name its source. "Mr. Salvatore." She managed to keep her voice steady, professional, despite the way her heart slammed against her ribs. "This is unexpected. I'm just having lunch with—" She started to introduce Brett to smooth over whatever this was, but Dominic cut her off. "Your friend from college." His voice was dangerously soft, each word precisely enunciated. "How lovely." Brett, to his credit, seemed oblivious to the undercurrents. He extended his hand across the table with that easy corporate charm. "Brett Callahan. Isa and I went to Columbia together. Are you a colleague of hers?" Dominic ignored the offered hand entirely. His attention remained locked on Isa's eyes, burning with something that made her skin prickle. "Miss Thorne is my personal secretary. She should have informed me she was leaving the office for a personal meeting." The emphasis on personal carried a weight that made Brett's smile falter slightly. "I told you I was taking lunch." Issa fought to keep her voice level, fought against the heat creeping up her neck. "At Antonio's. You said you were meeting a friend." Dominic's voice dropped even lower, and he moved closer into what should have been an uncomfortable invasion of her personal space. "You didn't mention it was a date." The accusation hung in the air between them, sharp and unmistakable. "It's not—" She started to protest, but the words stuck in her throat because what was this if not a date? Brett had invited her to lunch, called her beautiful, was clearly interested in being more than friends. Brett's lawyer instincts finally kicked in. He straightened in his seat, voice taking on a professional edge. "Listen, I don't know what your relationship is with Isa, but you can't just—" Dominic's head turned slowly toward Brett. Whatever Brett saw in Dominic's expression made him fall silent mid-sentence, the words dying on his lips. The restaurant had gone quiet now, conversations dying in widening circles as people sensed the violence coiled beneath Dominic's controlled exterior. "Isadora." Dominic's attention returned to her, his use of her full name, intimate and possessive in a way that made her stomach flip. "We're leaving. Now." "No." The word escaped before she could stop it, powered by 2 years of suppressed frustration and confusion and want. "You don't get to do this, Dominic. You don't get to show up during my lunch hour and order me around like I'm—" "Like you're what?" He leaned down, a hands bracing on the table on either side of her plate, caging her in. His face inches from hers, close enough that she could see the amber flecks in his dark eyes, could smell his cologne mixing with the scent of garlic and wine from nearby tables. "Like you're mine." Her breath caught. The restaurant had gone completely silent around them, 40-plus people watching this confrontation unfold with the morbid fascination of witnesses to a car accident. "I'm your secretary," she whispered, though her voice shook. "That's all." "Is it—" His voice dropped to something intimate and dangerous, meant only for her despite their audience. "Is that why you can't look at me without your pulse racing? Why your breath catches when I say your name? Why you've been lying to yourself for 2 years about what's between us?" Heat flooded her face. How did he know? How could he possibly know when she'd worked so hard to hide every reaction, every wayward thought? "Are you on a date, Isadora?" he demanded, and there was something raw in his voice now, the controls slipping to reveal the rage and jealousy beneath. "Is that what this is? You sitting here with another man, letting him look at you like he has the right— I can see whoever I want." She managed to force the words out, though her voice trembled. "You have no claim on me." Something feral and possessive flashed in his dark eyes, eclipsing the amber completely. "Don't I?" Then he kissed her. Right there in the middle of Antonio's bistro, with Brett sitting across from her, and Kane standing guard, and half of Little Italy watching, Dominic Salvatore claimed her mouth with a hunger that stole her breath and obliterated every rational thought in her head. His hand cupped her face, tilting her head back as he deepened the kiss. His tongue demanded entry that she granted without hesitation, without thought, without any of the resistance she should have mustered. She tasted espresso and mint and something darker, something uniquely him that made her moan against his mouth. The world narrowed to this, his lips on hers, his hand in her hair, the solid warmth of his body as he leaned over the table. Heat everywhere, awareness sparking through every nerve ending. Her hands found his shirt, fisted in the expensive fabric, pulling him closer, when every logical brain cell screamed that she should push him away. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. His thumb traced her swollen lower lip, his expression fierce and satisfied and utterly possessive. "Mine." He said it loud enough for everyone to hear, loud enough that there could be no mistaking his meaning. "You're mine, Isadora Thorne, and it's time everyone knew it." The restaurant remained frozen in that crystallized moment of shock. Brett's expression cycled through confusion, understanding, and something like pity. Other diners stared with undisguised fascination. Someone in the back corner held up their phone recording, probably capturing this scene that would spread through certain circles before nightfall. Kane appeared at Dominic's elbow, expression carefully neutral, despite what must have been his own shock at such a public display. "Boss, we should go." Dominic's hand slid from her face to her wrist grip, gentle but absolutely firm. "Come with me." It wasn't a request. It wasn't even a command. It was a statement of fact, of inevitability. She should refuse, should stay seated, finish lunch with Brett, pretend this hadn't just shattered every professional boundary they'd carefully maintained, should demand explanations, apologies, space to process what had just happened. Instead, she found herself standing, gathering her purse with numb fingers, following Dominic toward the exit while her brain scrambled to catch up with reality. Brett called after her, voice carrying equal parts concern and resignation. "Issa, if you need anything." She glanced back, found him still seated, looking smaller somehow in the wake of Dominic's overwhelming presence. "I'm sorry, Brett, I'm so sorry." Then Dominic's hand settled at the small of her back, possessive and protective, guiding her out of Antonio's bistro into the bright afternoon sunlight. The black Mercedes waited at the curb, Kane holding the door open. Dominic handed her in, first his touch careful, despite the violence she'd witnessed coiled beneath his surface moments ago. He slid in beside her, the door closing with a solid thunk that sealed them in leather-scented privacy. Kane took the driver's seat, the privacy screen already raised, granting them the illusion of being alone, despite guards in front and the city pressing in on all sides. The car pulled into traffic. Issa stared straight ahead, heart-hammering lips still tingling from his kiss, entire world view tilting on its axis. "You can't just—" she started, but Dominic cut her off. "I can. I did." His voice was calm now, controlled, but his eyes still burned with that possessive fire. "And before you tell me I crossed a line, consider that you kissed me back, Isadora, quite enthusiastically if I recall." Heat flooded her cheeks. "You caught me off guard." "Did I?" He shifted closer, his thigh pressing against hers in the confined space. "Or did I finally do what we've both been wanting for 2 years?" She opened her mouth to deny it, to maintain the professional fiction they'd built so carefully. But the words wouldn't come because he was right. She had kissed him back. She'd melted against him like she'd been waiting for that kiss her entire life, like every defense she'd built had been constructed from paper instead of steel. "This is a mistake," she whispered instead, the only truth she could manage. "You're my boss. There are rules, policies." "Not to mention what?" He turned to face her fully, his hand finding hers on the seat between them. "That I'm dangerous, that my business isn't entirely legal, that getting involved with me could put you at risk." "Yes, all of that." She finally met his gaze, found him watching her with an intensity that stole her remaining breath. "And I don't understand what's happening. 2 hours ago I was just your secretary. Now you're saying I'm yours, kissing me in public, and I don't know what that means." "It means—" He paused, thumb stroking across her knuckles in a gesture both possessive and tender. "That I'm done pretending I don't want you. Done acting like you're just another employee when you're so much more than that." "What am I then?" She had to ask, had to hear him say it, because her heart couldn't survive more uncertainty. He was silent for a long moment, dark eyes searching hers. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a vulnerability she'd never heard before. "I don't know yet. But I know I can't watch you have lunch with another man without wanting to commit violence. I know that seeing his eyes on you, seeing him make you laugh, it made something inside me snap." His grip tightened on her hand. "You're mine, Isadora. However that looks, whatever that means, you're mine." The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Should have sent up every red flag she'd learned to watch for from college articles about controlling relationships and dangerous men. But this felt different. It felt like claim and promise wrapped together, like he was offering her something precious, even if he couldn't quite name it yet. "You can't just decide that." She protested, but her voice came out weak, unconvincing even to her own ears. "I get a say in this." "Then say it." He leaned closer, his free hand coming up to trace her jawline with devastating gentleness. "Tell me you don't want this. Tell me you don't feel this pull between us. Tell me you haven't thought about what it would be like to be mine, and I'll take you back to the office and we'll pretend this never happened." She should have said it, should have protected herself, her job, her heart. But the words stuck in her throat because they would have been lies, and she'd never been good at lying to Dominic. "I can't." The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. "I can't tell you I don't want this. Triumph flashed in his eyes, fierce and unmistakable. Finally, finally you admit it. But that doesn't change the facts, she continued quickly, desperately. You're my boss. You're dangerous. Your world is dangerous, and I have no idea how this could possibly work. We'll figure it out. He said it with such certainty, such absolute conviction that she almost believed him. Together, Isadora. We'll figure it out together. The car pulled up to Salvatore Tower. Through the tinted windows, she could see the lobby bustling with the lunch-hour rush, employees and visitors moving through the marble space in organized chaos. The thought of walking in there with Dominic, of people seeing them together, knowing what had happened at Antonio's, they're going to know. She heard the panic in her own voice. Everyone's going to know. Good. His hand cupped her face, thumb stroking her cheekbone. Let them know. Let everyone know you're under my protection now. Under his protection. The phrase carried weight in his world, implications she was only beginning to understand. Kane opened the door, the sounds of the city rushing in. Dominic stepped out first, then offered his hand with a courtesy that seemed at odds with the primitive claiming that had happened at the restaurant. She took it, let him help her from the car, hyper-aware of the way people's gazes followed them. The lobby was indeed busy. She was acutely aware of curious glances, whispers starting the moment they entered. News traveled fast in Dominic's organization. By now, half the building probably knew what had happened at Antonio's. The other half would know within the hour. They rode the elevator in silence, though Dominic kept his hand at the small of her back, a gesture both possessive and protective. When they reached the 42nd floor, she expected him to disappear into his office to give her space to process everything that had just exploded her carefully ordered life. Instead, he followed her to her desk. Dominic, people are staring, she murmured, hyper-aware of curious glances from other employees in the hallway. Let them. He leaned against her desk, arms crossed, looking completely unconcerned, the picture of casual power. Are you going to see him again? His voice was deceptively mild. Brett? I don't know. She hadn't thought about it, her brain still scrambling to process the past 30 minutes. I hadn't thought. Think about it now. Not quite a command, but close. Are you going to see him again? She met his gaze steadily, saw the tension in his jaw despite his casual posture. Are you ordering me not to? No. Something that might have been frustration crossed his face. I'm asking you not to, as a man who's made his interest abundantly clear, not as your boss. The distinction mattered, she realized. He was trying in his own way to give her choice, even as everything in him clearly wanted to simply command and expect obedience. I won't see him again, she said quietly, and watched relief flash through his eyes. Not like that. He's a nice man, but I'm not interested in him. I never was. Because of me. He had to ask, had to hear her say it. Yes, because of you. Dominic's expression softened almost imperceptibly. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in a gesture surprisingly tender. Go home early today. Take the rest of the afternoon. Why? She was already behind on 3 projects, had calls to return, schedules to coordinate. Because in about an hour this office is going to be swarming with speculation and questions, and you're going to be at the center of it all. I'm giving you time to process before you have to face that. The thoughtfulness surprised her, cutting through her remaining defenses like a hot knife through butter. And what will you be doing? Damage control. His jaw tightened. That kiss was impulsive, possessive, and strategically foolish. I've just advertised to everyone with eyes that you matter to me, which makes you a target. Ice trickled down her spine. A target for who? The Morettis, for starters, my enemies. Anyone who might see you as leverage against me. His hand cupped her face again, thumb stroking her cheek with devastating gentleness. But don't worry, Isadora. I protect what's mine, and you're definitely mine now. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression went cold, all the warmth from moments ago evaporating. Kane. He called, and his head of security appeared instantly from wherever he'd been lurking. Take Miss Thorne home. Stay with her until I send relief. Dominic, that's not necessary. She started to protest. It's extremely necessary. He was already moving toward his office, the crisis mode she recognized from countless business emergencies taking over. "Go home, Isadora. We'll talk tonight." She wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. This was Dominic in full boss mode, making decisions about security and protection with the cold calculation that made him so dangerous. Kane drove her to her apartment in Brooklyn, a modest one-bedroom in a neighborhood slowly gentrifying block by block. He walked her up 3 flights of stairs, checked the interior with professional thoroughness she found both reassuring and unsettling, then positioned himself in the hallway outside her door. "This is really unnecessary," she tried one more time. "No one even knows where I live." Kane's expression was kind but firm. "The boss knows where you live, Miss Thorne, which means it's in files that could be accessed. Better to be cautious." She closed the door and leaned against it, finally alone with her thoughts for the first time since Dominic had stormed into Antonio's bistro. He'd kissed her, claimed her publicly in front of dozens of witnesses, told her she was his with a conviction that left no room for doubt, and she'd let him. More than that, she'd wanted it. Still wanted it, despite the fear and uncertainty and very real danger he'd mentioned. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, but the message made her blood run cold. "Congratulations on catching the Don's attention." How unfortunate. V. Her hands shook as she stared at the screen. V. Victor Moretti. Dominic's primary rival, the man whose meeting request had been denied just this morning. He already knew. Already saw her as a weakness to exploit. A second text came through, this one from Dominic's personal number she'd memorized but never used. "Answer when I call. D." The phone rang immediately. "How did you get my personal number?" she asked instead of hello, trying to inject some normalcy into a day that had gone completely off the rails. "I'm Dominic Salvatore." She could hear the smile in his voice despite everything. "I have everyone's personal number. Are you all right?" "I'm confused, overwhelmed, possibly making the worst decision of my life." The truth spilled out uncensored. "But I don't regret it." "Good. Neither do I." His voice went serious. "Ask me that again in a week. After you've had time to understand what being with me really means. After you've seen the parts of my life I've kept hidden from you. I knew what you were when I took this job, Dominic." She sank onto her worn couch, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming. "I'm not naive. You know what I am on paper. You don't know what it's like to live it." He paused, and she heard voices in the background, urgent Italian. "There's a dinner tonight at my family's estate in Westchester. I'd like you to come with me." Her stomach clenched. "As what, your secretary?" "As mine." The possessiveness was back in his voice, absolute and unwavering. "As the woman who's going to stand by my side and let everyone know that touching you means war. That's a lot of pressure for a first date." She tried to joke, but her voice shook. "This isn't a first date, Isadora." His voice dropped to something dark and intimate. "First dates are dinner and movies and goodnight kisses at the door. This is me bringing you into my world, showing you exactly what you're agreeing to. If you can handle tonight, if you can stand beside me and still look at me the same way you did this afternoon, then we'll talk about what comes next. And if I can't handle it..." She had to ask, had to know. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken implications. "Then I'll let you go," he finally said, and she heard the cost of that promise in his voice. "I'll let you walk away, help you find a new job somewhere far from me, and I'll spend the rest of my life regretting that I kissed you too soon." "You won't let me go," she said with sudden certainty. "You're too possessive for that." "You're right." His honesty was brutal, absolute. "I won't want to let you go, but I will if that's what's best for you. Because as much as I want you, as much as I need you, I won't keep you if my world destroys you." The raw emotion in his admission made her chest tight, made her eyes burn with tears she refused to shed. "What time tonight?" "I'll pick you up at 7. Wear something elegant." She heard the relief in his voice, carefully controlled but unmistakable. "And Isadora, yes. Thank you for giving me this chance, for not running when you should have." After he hung up, she sat in her apartment staring at the 2 text messages, one threat, one summons, that represented her new reality. She'd crossed a line today. Let Dominic pull her across it with a kiss that had been witnessed by half of Little Italy and would be dissected in certain circles for weeks to come. Tomorrow, her life would be irrevocably different. Tonight she had to face his family, had to walk into that world with her eyes open and her decision made. But right now, in this moment of suspended time, she let herself acknowledge the truth she'd been hiding for 2 years. She was already his. Had been his since that first interview, that first lingering look, that first moment of recognition that this man would change everything. The only question remaining was whether she was strong enough to survive what came next. The morning after changed everything and nothing simultaneously. Isa woke in Dominic's arms, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, her body still humming from the night before. He was already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "What are you thinking?" She traced patterns on his bare chest, felt his heartbeat steady beneath her palm. "That I want to do this right." His hand caught hers, brought it to his lips. "Court you properly. Take you on actual dates where I'm not consumed by jealousy or reacting to threats. Show you what being with me could look like when I'm not acting on impulse. You already claimed me in front of half of Little Italy. I think we're past traditional courtship. Maybe. But you deserve it anyway." He shifted to look at her properly, his dark eyes serious. "I want to earn this, Isadora. Earn you. Not just take because I can." Something in her chest tightened at the vulnerability in his voice. This dangerous man, this crime boss who commanded empires, asking permission to court her like they were living in some other century. "Okay." She pressed a kiss to his jaw. "Court me, Dominic Salvatore. Show me your world." Over the next 10 days, he did exactly that. Wednesday evening arrived with Dominic cooking in the penthouse kitchen, an apron tied around his waist that should have looked ridiculous, but instead made him somehow more attractive. The domestic scene was so at odds with everything she knew about him that she stood in the doorway just watching, memorizing this moment. "My grandmother taught me." He didn't look up from the pasta he was making, from scratch hands working the dough with practiced efficiency. She said a man who can't feed himself or the woman he loves is only half a man. Your grandmother sounds formidable. She was. Survived the Depression, raised 5 children. After my grandfather died young, ran the family's legitimate businesses, while my great-grandfather handled the other side. He glanced up, flour dusting his forearms. She would have liked you, respected your strength. The kitchen smelled of garlic and fresh basil wine already breathing on the counter. Isa perched on a bar stool, watching him move through the space with the same controlled grace he brought to everything. "Tell me about her. About your family before all the violence and territory wars." Something in his expression softened. "They were farmers originally before they came to America. Grew grapes, made wine, lived simply. My great-grandfather arrived at Ellis Island with nothing but the clothes on his back and a letter of introduction to a family already established here. What changed? How did farmers become—" She gestured vaguely, encompassing everything his world had become. "Survival." He set the pasta to rest, came around the counter to stand beside her. Prohibition made criminals of honest men. The families that were already here, already organized, they offered protection, opportunity, a way to build something. My great-grandfather chose to join, rather than struggle alone. His hand found hers, thumb stroking across her knuckles. Every generation since has tried to make the business more legitimate, cleaner. My father added real estate construction finance. I've pushed further into technology, clean energy ventures that won't land us in federal court. But you can't fully separate from the old ways. No, the foundation was built on blood and violence. We can renovate the house, but the bones remain what they've always been. His eyes held hers with complete honesty. That's what you need to understand, Isadora. I'm trying to be better than my father, better than the men who came before. But I'll never be completely clean. I'm not asking you to be. She cupped his face, felt the slight stubble rough against her palm. I'm asking you to be honest with me. Always. About the dangers, the choices, the life we'd be building together. Always. He kissed her slow and thorough, tasting of the wine he'd been sampling. That's a promise. Dinner was revelation and seduction wrapped together. He'd set the table with candles and burgundy wine that reminded her of the color Kat had chosen for her gala dress. The pasta was perfect, the sauce rich with tomatoes and herbs, and between courses he told her stories about growing up in this world, the good and the terrible, the family dinners and the funerals, the moments of pure joy and the ones that still haunted him. I was 12 when I first understood what my father really did. His voice went quiet, distant. There was a man, someone who'd betrayed the family, stolen money, fed information to rivals. My father brought me to the warehouse where they were holding him. She watched his hands tighten on his wine glass, knuckles going white. He made me watch what they did to traitors, made me understand that this world has rules and breaking them has consequences. I threw up behind a shipping container afterward, but my father said it was necessary, that I needed to see reality if I was going to lead someday. That's horrific. You were a child. I was the heir to an empire built on violence. His eyes met hers, and she saw old pain there, carefully controlled but never fully healed. He was preparing me for what I'd have to become, and he succeeded. I can make those decisions now, can order violence when necessary without flinching. But it cost me something, made me into someone who doesn't feel deeply, doesn't connect easily. You connect with me. She said it with certainty, watched his expression shift. You're different. You've always been different. His hand found hers across the table. You look at me and see a man, not a monster or a meal ticket or a stepping stone to power. Just a man who happens to run a criminal empire and cook decent pasta. She laughed, despite the heaviness of their conversation. The best pasta I've ever had, actually. Don't tell my Aunt Maria. She'd be devastated. The evening ended with them on the couch, her tucked against his side, both of them watching the city lights shimmer below. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder, and for the first time since the restaurant scene, she felt truly at peace. I'm glad you're doing this. She tilted her head to look up at him. The courtship, the dates. It feels like we're building something real instead of just reacting to danger. We are building something real. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Something that will last beyond threats and territory wars. Something worth protecting. Friday evening brought a different kind of magic. The Metropolitan Museum of Art. After hours, every gallery empty except for them, and the silent watchfulness of Kane positioned discreetly near exits. You rented the entire museum. Issa stared at the vast emptiness of the great hall, their footsteps echoing on marble floors. Just the European paintings wing, for 2 hours. Dominic's hand settled at the small of her back, guiding her toward the galleries. I wanted to see it through your eyes. You mentioned once that you loved Renaissance art, but never had time to really study it. The fact that he'd remembered a throwaway comment from months ago made her chest tight. They wandered through rooms filled with masterpieces, and she found herself explaining techniques and historical context while he listened with complete attention. This one. She stopped in front of a Caravaggio, the dramatic use of light and shadow taking her breath away. The way he captures the exact moment of revelation of understanding, it's devastating and beautiful simultaneously. Like recognizing you love someone when you thought you were incapable of it. His voice was quiet, meant only for her. Devastating and beautiful. She turned to find him watching her instead of the painting, his expression open in a way she'd rarely seen. When did you know? She had to ask. Not just that you were attracted to me, but that it was more. He was silent for a long moment, eyes moving over her face like he was memorizing every detail. 6 months ago. Your birthday. I'd sent the book anonymously because I couldn't let the day pass unmarked, but I told myself it was just a professional courtesy. Then I saw you the next morning and you were wearing this small smile, just the tiniest curve of your lips, but it transformed your whole face. His hand came up to trace her jawline. You looked so happy, so genuinely touched by the gift, and I realized I wanted to be the reason for that smile every day. Wanted to know every small thing that brought you joy so I could provide it. That's when I understood this wasn't attraction or convenience, it was something far more dangerous. Why didn't you say anything? Because I was terrified. The admission cost him something. I've built my entire adult life on control, on never being vulnerable, on keeping everyone at arm's length so they couldn't be used against me. Then you walked in with your color-coded files and your unshakable composure and demolished every wall I'd constructed. He pulled her closer, foreheads touching. I spent 6 months trying to convince myself it would pass, that it was just proximity and attraction. Then I saw you with Brett and realized I'd rather burn the entire city down than watch you belong to someone else. I could never belong to anyone else. She kissed him soft and certain. I've been yours since that interview, Dominic. I just didn't have the courage to admit it until you forced my hand. They ended up slow dancing in the empty gallery. No music except the quiet hum of climate control and their own breathing. His hand splayed across her lower back, holding her close while they swayed in front of paintings worth millions, and Isa thought she'd never felt wealthier than in this moment. Tell me something you've never told anyone. His voice was low, intimate against her ear. I want to write a book someday. Historical fiction, probably something set in Renaissance Italy. I've been researching for 3 years, have notebooks full of character sketches and plot outlines, but I'm terrified to actually start writing. Why? Because then it becomes real. Then I have to face the possibility that I might fail at something I care deeply about. She felt his arms tighten around her. It's easier to keep it as a someday dream than risk discovering I'm not good enough. You're brilliant, Isadora. Whatever you write will be exceptional because you pour yourself completely into everything you do. He pulled back to look at her. And when you're ready to start, I'll make sure you have time. And office resources, whatever you need. You can't just solve every problem by throwing money at it. Watch me. His smile was small but genuine. I'm good at exactly 2 things: building empires and protecting what's mine. Let me do both for you. Sunday brought the family estate again, but this time felt different. Less like an evaluation, more like acceptance of something already decided. Salvatore Sr. still regarded her with calculation, but beneath it she sensed grudging respect. Catalina pulled her aside almost immediately. He's different with you. Kat handed her a glass of wine, gestured toward where Dominic stood talking with his father. Softer, more human. I didn't think anyone could do that to him. He's doing the same to me, making me braver than I thought I could be. Good. You'll need that courage. Kat's expression turned serious. The Morettis are watching Isa. They've had surveillance on both of you for days. Kane's people spotted 3 different teams. Ice slid down her spine despite the warm afternoon sun. Does Dominic know? He knows. He's managing it. But I wanted you to understand this isn't just romance. Every date, every public appearance, you're making yourselves targets. The Morettis see you as his weakness now. Then they're looking at it wrong. Isa met Kat's eyes steadily. I'm not his weakness. I'm going to be his strength. Kat's smile was fierce and approving. I'm starting to believe that. The afternoon passed in family chaos. Cousins arriving with children who ran shrieking through the gardens, aunts who interrogated Isa about everything from her education to her intentions, uncles who sized her up with the same calculating assessment she'd endured from Salvatore Sr. Through it all, Dominic stayed close, his hand at her back, or holding hers a constant anchor. As the sun began setting, painting the estate in shades of amber and rose, he led her to the gardens behind the main house. Rose arbors created private alcoves, and in one of these he pulled her close, kissed her with a hunger barely restrained. I need you. The words came out rough, desperate. Every day since Tuesday, every moment we're apart, I need you, Isadora. It terrifies me how much. I know. She pulled him down for another kiss. I feel it too, like I can't breathe properly when you're not close. His hands tangled in her hair, tilting her head back to deepen the kiss. This was different from the controlled seduction of previous nights. This was raw need, barely leashed desire, the careful courtship cracking under the weight of wanting. Come home with me tonight. His voice was rough velvet against her ear. Stay. Not just tonight, but every night. Move into the penthouse. Let me wake up with you every morning. Dominic. I know it's fast. I know we should take more time, do this properly. His forehead pressed against hers, breath coming hard. But I'm done pretending this is casual, done acting like I could survive you walking away. I want you in my space, in my life permanently." "Yes." The answer came without hesitation, felt inevitable as sunrise. "Yes, I'll move in. I'll stay." His kiss this time was claiming and celebration wrapped together thorough enough that they were both breathless when he finally pulled back. "But Dominic—" She caught his face between her hands, made him focus on her. "I need something from you too. I need you to trust that I'm strong enough for this world, strong enough to stand beside you when things get dangerous, not hide behind your protection." "I do trust that." His hands framed her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "You're the strongest person I know, but trusting your strength and being willing to put you in danger are different things. Then learn to balance them, because I won't be locked away in a gilded cage, even one built from love." She held his gaze, letting him see her certainty. "We're partners, Dominic. Equals. That means I get a say in how we handle threats, not just orders to follow." Something shifted in his expression. Challenge accepted, respect earned. "Partners. In everything. In everything." She sealed the promise with a kiss. Tuesday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth and Dominic's plan for something special. The rooftop garden of Salvatore Tower transformed with string lights and a table set for two, the city spreading out below them in glittering sprawl. "This is beautiful." Issa turned in a slow circle, taking in the fairy tale setting he'd created 42 floors above the streets. "Not as beautiful as you." He pulled out her chair with old-fashioned courtesy, and she noticed his hands trembled. Slightly nerved, she realized with wonder. Dominic Salvatore was nervous. Dinner was catered by the same restaurant where he'd claimed her so publicly, but this time the food came with privacy and intention rather than jealousy and drama. They ate slowly, talking about everything and nothing, building layers of intimacy through shared stories and comfortable silence. As dessert arrived, tiramisu that melted on her tongue, Dominic's expression turned serious. "I have something to ask you. Something I should probably wait to ask. Give us more time. Do this properly in a few months when we're more established." His hand found hers across the table. "But I've never been good at waiting for things I want desperately." Her heart kicked against her ribs. "Dominic, let me finish." He stood moved to her side of the table, and she stopped breathing entirely when he knelt beside her chair. "Isadora Thorne, I've loved you since the moment you walked into my office and looked at me without fear. I've spent 2 years wanting you, 6 months knowing I needed you, and 10 days discovering I can't survive without you." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opened it to reveal a ring that stole her breath. Platinum band with a single perfect diamond, elegant and understated and absolutely stunning. "The charity gala is this Saturday. Every major family in the city will be there, including Victor Moretti and anyone else who might see you as weakness to exploit. I want to walk in there with you as my fiancé. I want everyone to know that you're mine, that threatening you means declaring war on the Salvatore family." His dark eyes held hers with complete vulnerability. "But more than strategy, more than protection, I want you to be my wife because I love you, because you make me better, braver, more human than I ever thought I could be. Marry me, Isadora. After the gala, after we've faced the Morettis together and survived, marry me, and let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you." Tears blurred her vision. She should say no, should point out they'd only been together 10 days, that marriage was insane and rushed, and every logical reason screamed caution. But looking at this powerful, dangerous man on his knees in front of her, offering not just protection but partnership, not just his name but his heart, logic didn't matter. "Yes." The word came out steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I'll marry you, Dominic Salvatore. After the gala, after we survive whatever comes, I'll marry you." His smile was pure joy, unguarded and breathtaking. He slid the ring onto her finger, the weight of it feeling both foreign and absolutely right, then pulled her to her feet and kissed her with a reverence that made her knees weak. "You've made me the happiest man alive," he murmured against her lips, "and the most terrified." "Good," she laughed through tears. "We'll be terrified together." The days leading to the gala passed in a blur of preparation and escalating tension. News of their engagement spread through certain circles within hours. Catalina had apparently been unable to keep the secret, though Isa suspected it was strategic rather than accidental. Better for people to know to understand the stakes before they all gathered in one place. Thursday brought Kane's report about surveillance intensifying. Friday morning, Isa found a gift at her new desk in the penthouse. The guest room had been converted to an office complete with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a window overlooking the city. The note in Dominic's handwriting was simple: "For your book when you're ready. I believe in you." D. She sat at the antique desk he'd somehow procured overnight and cried, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of being loved this completely by someone this powerful. Friday evening, Catalina arrived with the burgundy dress and a makeup artist who transformed Isa into someone she barely recognized. Elegant, sophisticated, dangerous in her own right. "You look like a queen." Kat studied her with satisfaction. "Tomorrow night you show them all exactly what it means to be Dominic Salvatore's woman." "His equal," Isa corrected gently. "His partner?" "Even better." Kat's smile was fierce. "Show them that." Saturday arrived with crystalline clarity, the kind of perfect autumn day that felt like a gift and a warning simultaneously. Isa woke, wrapped in Dominic's arm's engagement ring, catching morning light, and allowed herself one moment of pure contentment before reality crashed back. Tonight, the gala. Walking into a room full of New York's elite and criminal underworld, standing beside Dominic while Victor Moretti watched and calculated. "What are you thinking?" Dominic's voice was rough with sleep, his hand splaying across her stomach. "That I'm terrified and exhilarated in equal measure." She turned to face him. "That everything changes tonight. Everything already changed 10 days ago in a restaurant in Little Italy." He kissed her softly. "Tonight we just make it official." The Metropolitan Museum, transformed for the gala, was breathtaking. Hundreds of guests in designer gowns and tuxedos, champagne flowing freely, string quartet playing classical pieces that probably cost more than most people's mortgages. Everywhere Isa looked were faces from society pages and news reports, wealth and power and danger wrapped in elegant packaging. Dominic kept her close, his hand at the small of her back, or holding hers, the engagement ring on her finger, catching light and drawing eyes. Kane and 2 other guards flanked them at discreet distances, ever-present shadows. "There." Dominic's voice was low, meant only for her. "By the Renaissance collection. Victor Moretti." The man looked exactly as Kat had described, 60 years old, but vital, silver hair, swept-back tuxedo that screamed old money and older violence. When his gaze landed on them, his smile was pleasant and utterly cold. "Dominic Salvatore." Victor approached with a younger man trailing his son, Julian Isa, noted from previous briefings. "What a pleasure to see you here." "Victor." Dominic's voice was carefully neutral. Victor's attention shifted to Isa, his gaze traveling over her with the same calculating assessment she'd endured from Salvatore Sr. Then his eyes caught on the ring and something flickered in his expression. "And this must be the lovely Miss Thorne. Though I see congratulations are in order, that's quite an impressive engagement ring." "Mrs. Salvatore, actually." Dominic corrected smoothly, and Isa's head snapped toward him in shock. They weren't married. The engagement ring sat on her finger, but they'd agreed to wait until after the gala to discuss actual wedding plans. Yet Dominic was claiming they were already married, creating a fiction in front of their greatest threat. Victor's eyes narrowed fractionally. "My sincere congratulations. I hadn't heard about a wedding. How sudden." "We prefer privacy in personal matters." Dominic's arm tightened around Isa's waist, pulling her flush against his side. "I'm sure you understand." "Of course." Victor's smile never wavered, but his eyes had gone colder. "Though I am curious, does your lovely bride understand the responsibilities and dangers that come with the Salvatore name?" "I understand perfectly." Isa found her voice kept it steady despite her racing heart. "My husband has been very clear about our life together." Something that might have been surprise flickered across Victor's face that she'd spoken at all. Well then, I wish you both happiness. Marriage can be so rewarding when one finds the right partner. His pause was deliberate, weighted. And so tragic when that partner is taken away. The threat was barely veiled. Dominic went rigid beside her, violence coiling beneath his expensive tailoring. Is that a warning, Victor? Merely an observation. Victor spread his hands in false innocence. The world is dangerous. Accidents happen even to those we love most. Then it's fortunate I take extensive precautions to protect what's mine. Dominic's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. I'd hate for accidents to befall my wife. It would make me quite unreasonable. The two men stared at each other, tension crackling between them like electricity. Then Victor smiled, inclined his head slightly. Enjoy the evening, Dominic, and congratulations again on your marriage. I'm sure it will be blessed. He moved away, Julian following with an expression Issa couldn't read, something between pity and understanding. We're not married. She kept her voice low, hyper-aware of nearby guests. Why did you tell him we were— Dominic pulled her toward a quieter corner. Because in our world a wife has protections a fiancé doesn't. Legal and cultural protections that make you untouchable in ways that matter to men like Victor. So we're fake married now. Or— His dark eyes held hers with complete seriousness. We could make it real. Right now, tonight. Judge Brennan is here. He owes the family favors, could marry us legally before anyone knows what's happening. Her mind reeled. Dominic, we talked about this. After the gala, we are after. He cupped her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. We're in the middle of it, Isadora, facing threats together right now, and I'd rather face them with you as my wife in truth, not just in fiction. She stared at him, heart-hammering, mind racing through all the logical reasons this was insane. They'd been engaged for 4 days, known each other romantically for less than 2 weeks. Marriage should wait, should be planned, should be yes. The word came out before logic could intervene. Yes, let's do it. Let's get married tonight. The ceremony happened in a private room off the main hall, Judge Brennan officiating with Cain Torres and Catalina summoned from the crowd as witnesses. 10 minutes from start to finish. Simple vows exchanged with complete sincerity. Dominic's hands steady as he slid a platinum band onto her finger to match the engagement ring. Judge Brennan declaring them legally married under the authority vested in him. When Dominic kissed her, thorough and possessive and utterly certain, Issa felt something fundamental shift in her chest. This was real, permanent, irrevocable. Mrs. Salvatore. He tested the name, smiled. My wife. Your wife. She repeated, letting reality settle. This is completely insane. Completely. He kissed her again. And perfect. They returned to the gala as husband and wife, and Dominic wasted no time spreading the word. Within minutes it seemed like everyone knew, whispers spreading like wildfire. Congratulations offered with varying degrees of sincerity, news rippling outward in concentric circles. Victor Moretti's expression when he heard was worth capturing: shock, giving way to calculation, giving way to cold fury, barely masked by his polished facade. You've made your statement. He approached them again, Julian trailing with an unreadable expression. Quite dramatically. I believe in clarity. Dominic's arm tightened around Issa's waist. My wife deserves to be acknowledged properly. I wish you both happiness. Victor's voice was flat, emotionless. Truly. But his eyes said this isn't over. They said you've made yourself vulnerable and I will exploit it. They left early, newlywed impatience their excuse. In the car with privacy screen raised, Dominic pulled Issa onto his lap, kissed her with a desperation that spoke of relief and fear in equal measure. I love you, he murmured against her lips. My wife. Mine. Yours, she agreed. Always yours. 3 days later. Tuesday morning at 2:30, Cain's emergency call shattered any illusion of safety the marriage might have provided. The Brooklyn docks had been hit. $4 million in goods stolen, another $1 million in cash, weapons cache worth $2 million on the street, all gone. 2 Salvatore men hospitalized, beaten but alive, and spray-painted on the warehouse wall in letters 3 feet high. Wedding gift for Mrs. Salvatore. Fiv M. Asa stood in Dominic's study as he received the news, watched his expression go cold in the way that meant someone was about to learn what happened when they threatened what he loved. "This is because of me." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "They did this because marrying me made you vulnerable." "No." He crossed to her in 3 strides, hands framing her face. "This is because Victor Moretti is a vindictive bastard who can't accept that he's outmatched. This is not on you." But she saw the fear beneath his fury, understood what he wasn't saying, that loving her had given his enemies leverage they'd be fools not to exploit. The war had truly begun, and she was the reason. The week between that night and the charity gala passed in a blur of strategic planning and escalating tension. Dominic worked around the clock, making calls to allies, reinforcing security protocols, calling in favors from people whose names Issa recognized from news reports about political corruption and organized crime. She stayed by his side through most of it, learning the intricate web of relationships that kept his world functioning, offering input that surprised him with its strategic insight. On Tuesday morning, Kane appeared in Dominic's office with information that made the air in the room go cold. "We've confirmed surveillance on the penthouse. 3 different teams over the past 4 days. Moretti's people, all of them." Dominic's hand tightened on the pen he'd been holding, knuckles going white. "How close did they get?" "Never inside the building. But they have photos. Timestamps. They know her schedule, know when she comes and goes." Issa felt ice slide down her spine. The threat wasn't abstract anymore. It was men with cameras documenting her movements, tracking her patterns, building a profile for purposes she didn't want to imagine. "Double her security detail." Dominic's voice was flat, controlled in a way that meant he was barely holding back fury. "I want someone on her every time she leaves this building. No exceptions." "Already done, boss. Marco and Torres are downstairs now." After Kane left, Dominic sat in silence for a long moment, staring at nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made her chest ache. "I should send you away. Somewhere they can't find you, can't watch you. Montana Ranch, maybe, or the safe house in Wyoming. We've had this conversation." She moved around the desk, perched on the edge near his chair. "I'm not leaving you to face this alone. You don't understand what they're capable of." He looked up at her, and she saw fear naked in his eyes for the first time. "Victor Moretti doesn't make empty threats. If he's decided you're a vulnerability worth exploiting, then we prove him wrong." She took his hand, squeezed with more confidence than she felt. "Together. The worst thing I can do is run and hide, prove that I am your weakness. But if I stand beside you, show no fear, what does that prove? That you're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Maybe both." She managed to smile. "But I made my choice, Dominic. I'm not changing it now because things got scary." Friday brought a different kind of complication. Catalina arrived at the penthouse unannounced, sweeping past Kane with the ease of someone who'd grown up in this world and understood exactly how much power she wielded. "We need to talk about what you're wearing to the gala," she announced without preamble, then turned to Dominic. "And you need to leave. This is girl time." Dominic looked between them, clearly torn between amusement and concern. "Kat, if this is some attempt to help your woman not embarrass you at the biggest social event of the season, yes, now go away." After he left, shaking his head but complying, Kat turned to Issa with an expression that was equal parts assessment and approval. "He's completely gone for you. It's actually painful to watch." "The feeling is mutual," Issa admitted, because there seemed no point in pretending with someone as perceptive as Catalina. "Good. Because what you're walking into tomorrow night, it's not just a charity gala. It's theater. Every family will be watching to see how you handle yourself, whether you crack under pressure, whether you're worthy of the Salvatore name." She pulled out her phone, started scrolling through images. "Which is why you need to look absolutely untouchable. Regal. Like you were born to this." The dress Kat had selected was burgundy silk, the exact shade of wine from Issa's first real date with Dominic. The neckline was elegant without being provocative, the skirt flowing to the floor in a way that suggested old Hollywood glamour. When Issa tried it on, Kat's smile was triumphant. "Perfect. You look like a queen. Dominic's going to lose his mind." "That's the goal." Part of it. The other part is making sure every other woman there understands they don't stand a chance, and that the men see you as an extension of Dominic's power, not a weakness to exploit. Issa studied herself in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. She looked sophisticated, confident, dangerous in her own right. "Can I ask you something?" Kat's expression shifted to something more serious. "Always. Are you ever afraid living in this world, knowing the dangers? Every day." The honesty was brutal but not unkind. "But I learned early that showing fear is more dangerous than the threats themselves. You armor yourself in confidence in the knowledge that your family will go to war for you, and you trust that the men who love you know what they're doing." "Do they know what they're doing?" Kat's smile was sad around the edges. "Sometimes. But love makes them reckless too, makes them take risks they shouldn't. Your job isn't to stop them, it's to be strong enough to survive when things go wrong." Saturday arrived with unseasonable warmth for October. Issa woke in Dominic's arms, his body curved protectively around hers, and allowed herself a moment of pure contentment before reality crashed back. Tonight, the gala. Walking into a room full of New York's elite and criminal underworld, simultaneously standing beside Dominic, while Victor Moretti watched and calculated. Dominic stirred, pressed a kiss to her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" "Tonight. Whether I'm ready for this." "You're ready." He pulled her closer, his hand splaying across her stomach. "You've been ready since the moment you looked at me during your interview without flinching. This is just the next step." The Metropolitan Museum of Art had been transformed for the annual charity gala. Hundreds of guests in designer gowns and tuxedos filled the grand halls, champagne flowing freely, a string quartet playing classical pieces that probably cost more per minute than most people made in an hour. Everywhere Issa looked were faces she recognized from society pages and occasional news reports about white-collar crime and political scandals. Dominic kept her close, his hand at the small of her back or holding hers, a constant reminder of his presence and protection. Kane and two other guards flanked them at discreet distances, ever-present shadows. "There." Dominic's voice was low, meant only for her. "By the Renaissance collection. That's Victor Moretti." The man was perhaps 60, silver hair swept back from a face that would have been handsome if not for the coldness in his eyes. He wore a tuxedo that probably cost more than her car moved through the crowd with the easy confidence of someone who'd never questioned his power. When his gaze landed on them, his smile was pleasant and didn't reach his eyes at all. "Dominic Salvatore." Victor approached with a younger man trailing behind his son Issa, assumed from the family resemblance. "What a pleasure to see you here." "Victor." Dominic's voice was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. Victor's attention shifted to Issa, his gaze traveling over her with the same calculating assessment she'd endured at Salvatore Sr.'s house. "And this must be the lovely Miss Thorne I've heard so much about." "Mrs. Salvatore," Dominic corrected smoothly, and Issa's head snapped toward him in shock. They weren't married. They'd agreed to wait to see if they survived tonight before making that commitment. But Dominic was claiming they were creating a fiction in front of their greatest threat. Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. "My sincere congratulations. I hadn't heard about an engagement, much less a wedding. How sudden." "We prefer to keep personal matters private." Dominic's arm tightened around Issa's waist, pulling her flush against his side. "I'm sure you understand." "Of course." Victor's smile never wavered. "Though I am curious, does your lovely bride understand what she's married into? The responsibilities and dangers that come with the Salvatore name?" "I understand perfectly." Issa found her voice kept it steady despite the way her heart hammered. "My husband has been very clear about what our life together entails." Something flickered in Victor's expression, surprise perhaps that she'd spoken at all. "Well then, I wish you both happiness. Marriage can be so rewarding when one finds the right partner." His pause was deliberate, weighted, and so tragic when that partner is taken away. The threat was barely veiled. Dominic went rigid beside her, his control slipping enough that she felt violence coiling beneath his expensive tailoring. "Is that a warning, Victor?" Merely an observation. Victor spread his hands in a gesture of false innocence. The world is dangerous after all. Accidents happen even to those we love most. Then it's fortunate I take extensive precautions to protect what's mine. Dominic's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. I'd hate for any accidents to befall my wife. It would make me quite unreasonable. The two men stared at each other, tension crackling between them like electricity before a lightning strike. Then Victor smiled, inclined his head slightly. Enjoy the evening, Dominic, and congratulations again on your marriage. I'm sure it will be a blessed union. He moved away, disappearing into the crowd with his son following. Isa released the breath she'd been holding. We're not married. She kept her voice low, hyper-aware of people nearby who might overhear. Why did you say we were? Dominic pulled her toward a quieter corner away from the immediate crowd. Because calling you my wife gives you protection under our laws that simply being my girlfriend doesn't. It makes you untouchable in ways that matter in this world. So we're fake married now? Or we could make it real? His dark eyes held hers with complete seriousness. Right now, tonight. Judge Brennan is here. He's in our pocket. We could do it legally properly before anyone knows what's happening. Her mind reeled. Dominic, we talked about this. After the gala, we are facing it together. Right now, Isadora. And I'd rather face it with you as my wife in truth, not just fiction. His hands framed her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. Marry me, tonight. Make me the happiest and most terrified man alive. She should have said no. Should have insisted they stick to their plan, give themselves time, not make permanent decisions under duress. But looking into his eyes, feeling the solid warmth of him against her, she realized the truth. She was going to marry Dominic Salvatore. Whether tonight or next week or next month, it was inevitable as sunrise. They were inevitable. Yes. The word came out steadier than she expected. Yes, let's do it. Let's get married tonight. The ceremony happened in a private room off the main hall, Judge Brennan officiating with Kane, another guard named Torres and Catalina, who appeared seemingly from nowhere as witnesses. It took less than 10 minutes from start to finish. The exchange of simple vows, the signing of documents that made it legal under New York law, Judge Brennan declaring them married with the authority vested in him. Dominic kissed her when it was done, thorough and possessive and utterly certain. When he pulled back, his eyes held something she'd never seen before, pure, unguarded joy. Mrs. Salvatore. He tested the name, smiled. My wife. Your wife. She repeated, letting the reality settle over her. This is insane. Completely. He kissed her again, softer this time, and I wouldn't change a single thing. They returned to the gala as husband and wife, and Dominic wasted no time spreading the word. Within minutes it seemed like everyone knew, whispers spreading through the crowd, congratulations offered with varying degrees of sincerity, the news rippling outward like a stone dropped in still water. Victor Moretti's expression when he heard was priceless. Shock giving way to calculation, giving way to a cold fury he couldn't quite hide behind his polished facade. You've made your statement. He approached them again, his son Julian trailing behind with an expression Isa couldn't quite read. Quite dramatically, I might add. I have a tendency toward the dramatic when it comes to my wife. Dominic's arm tightened around Isa's waist, his tone making it clear the emphasis on wife was deliberate. I believe in making things absolutely clear. Crystal clear. Victor's gaze dropped to Isa's left hand where Dominic had slipped a platinum band during the ceremony, simple, elegant, unmistakably a wedding ring. I wish you both happiness. Truly. But his eyes said something different. They said this isn't over. They said you've made yourself vulnerable, and I will exploit it. The rest of the gala passed in a haze of congratulations and veiled threats of champagne toasts and barely concealed danger. Through it all, Dominic kept her close, his touch both possessive and protective, the wedding band on her finger a constant reminder that she'd just legally bound herself to one of the most dangerous men in New York. They left early, citing newlywed impatience that made people laugh knowingly. But once they were in the car with Kane driving and Torres scanning for threats, Dominic's expression turned grim. The Morettis won't let this go unanswered. Marrying you publicly, making it legal and binding, it's a direct challenge to their authority. They'll have to respond. How? Ice trickled down her spine despite the car's warmth. I don't know yet, but we need to be ready for anything. He pulled her against his side, his hand finding hers. I'm sorry, Isadora. I've dragged you into a war you didn't ask for. You didn't drag me anywhere. She laced their fingers together, felt the matching wedding bands pressed together. I walked into this willingly. I married you willingly. Whatever comes next, we face it together. That's what being married means, right? His smile was tired, but genuine. That's exactly what it means. You and me against the world, Mrs. Salvatore. You and me. She agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss. The answer came Tuesday morning. Isa was at her desk outside Dominic's office, reviewing contracts and trying to adjust to the weight of the wedding band on her finger when Kane burst through the door with an urgency that made her pulse spike. Boss, we have a problem. The shipment at the Brooklyn docks, it's gone, all of it. Dominic emerged from his office, his expression going cold in the way she'd learned meant someone was about to pay dearly for their mistake. Define gone. Stolen in broad daylight. Moretti's people moved on our territory and took everything. The goods, the cash, the weapons. They left our men alive but beaten badly. 2 in the hospital stable, but... Kane's gaze flickered to Isa, hesitating. Say it in front of my wife. Dominic's voice was ice. She deserves to know. They left a message spray-painted on the warehouse wall. Wedding gift for Mrs. Salvatore M. The room tilted. This was because of her. Because Dominic had claimed her, married her, made her a symbol of something the Morettis wanted to destroy. How much did we lose? Dominic's voice was eerily calm, which somehow made it more terrifying. 4 million in goods, another million in cash, plus the weapons cache we had stored there, street value close to 2 million. $7 million. Gone because Victor Moretti wanted to prove a point about vulnerabilities and power. I need you to go home. Dominic turned to her, his expression unreadable. Take Kane and Torres. Go to the penthouse and stay there until I say otherwise. No. She stood, her hands planted firmly on her desk. I'm not running and hiding while you deal with this. We're married now. That means I stand with you. It means I protect you by any means necessary. His jaw tightened. Which includes sending you somewhere safe while I handle this. And I'm telling you I'm not leaving. She moved around the desk to stand in front of him. They did this because of me, Dominic. Because marrying me gave them leverage. The worst thing I can do now is prove them right by acting like your weakness. Something flickered in his eyes, pride warring with fear. Isadora, listen to me. She gripped his arms, forcing him to focus on her instead of the rage she could see building. If I hide, they win. They prove that I'm your vulnerability, that threatening me makes you weak. But if I stay, if I stand beside you and show no fear, what does that prove? She's right. Kane spoke quietly from his position by the door. Strategically speaking, having Mrs. Salvatore visible and unafraid sends a powerful message. Dominic stared at her for a long moment, clearly battling between his protective instincts and his strategic mind. Finally, he exhaled roughly. Fine, you stay. But security doubles. You don't go anywhere without guards. You don't make any public appearances without my approval. And if I say, run, you run. Understood. Understood. She stretched up to press a kiss to his lips, brief but grounding. Trust me. Trust us. We're partners, remember. In everything. His hand cupped her face, thumb stroking her cheekbone. God help me in everything. The war room meeting happened in Dominic's private conference room, a space Isa had never been allowed to enter before. Now she sat in the corner, silent but present, as a dozen men in expensive suits gathered to discuss retaliation. The plan they devised was precise and brutal, a coordinated strike on 3 Moretti operations timed to cause maximum disruption with minimal casualties. Not a bloodbath, Dominic insisted with a control that impressed and frightened her, but a clear message that the Salvatores didn't accept challenges to their territory. At midnight, Dominic left with Kane and a dozen armed men. Isa waited in the penthouse with Torres and two other guards pacing the floor and trying not to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. He returned at 3:17 in the morning, unharmed but exhausted. She met him at the door, searched his face for signs of injury or regret. "It's done." He pulled her into his arms, holding her with a desperation that made her chest ache. "3 of their operations are offline. Equal damage to what they took from us, maybe slightly more. They'll get the message. And now we wait to see how they respond." He pressed his face into her hair, breathing her in like she was oxygen. "Whether they escalate or accept that we're evenly matched, and further conflict serves no one." The answer came Wednesday morning in the form of news broadcasts and federal agents. Isa was making coffee in the penthouse kitchen when Catalina burst through the door without knocking, her expression more serious than Isa had ever seen. "Turn on the news. Channel 7, now." The television flickered to life and Isa's blood ran cold. Federal investigation launched into alleged organized crime connections of Dominic Salvatore, CEO of Salvatore Enterprises. Sources close to the investigation say evidence has been provided linking Salvatore to illegal operations, including money laundering, weapons trafficking, and extortion. The reporter's voice faded into background noise as the implications crashed over her. "The Morettis went to the press." Kat's voice was tight with controlled fury. "They gave the FBI everything they need to build a case. This is legal warfare, Isa. If they can't beat Dominic in the streets, they'll try to take him down through the courts." "Can they?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Can they actually build a case?" "Probably. If they dig deep enough, look hard enough, there's always something. And if Dominic goes to prison—" Kat trailed off, but the implication was clear. If Dominic went to prison, Isa became a very wealthy widow who no longer had his protection. Vulnerable. Exploitable. Exactly what Victor Moretti wanted. Dominic appeared in the doorway, his expression murderous as he stared at the television. "This is my fault," Isa heard herself say. "They're doing this because I'm your weak point, because marrying me gave them—" "Stop." Dominic crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands framing her face with controlled gentleness. "This is not your fault. This is Victor Moretti being a vindictive bastard who can't accept that he's outmatched. None of this is on you. But if you hadn't married me, if I hadn't married you, they'd have found another angle to attack from. This is what they do, how they operate. You are not the problem, Isadora. You're the only thing keeping me sane right now." Kat cleared her throat. "We need damage control, political favors, legal maneuvering, media spin. This is going to get ugly before it gets better." What followed were some of the longest days of Isa's life. Dominic worked 20-hour days, calling in favors from politicians and judges, consulting with lawyers who specialized in making federal cases disappear. She stayed by his side through most of it, learning more about the intricate web of corruption and influence that kept his world functioning than she'd ever wanted to know. Late Thursday night, she found him in his study, staring at legal documents with bloodshot eyes and an empty whiskey glass. "You should leave the city." His voice was hoarse from hours of phone calls. "Go somewhere safe while I deal with this. Montana, Wyoming, somewhere they can't reach you." "We've had this conversation." She took the glass from his hand, set it aside, then settled onto his lap with a boldness that surprised them both. "I'm not leaving you to face this alone. Isadora, if this goes badly, if they actually build a case and I go to prison, you'll be alone. Vulnerable. Everything I've tried to protect you from. Then we make sure it doesn't go badly." She cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. "We fight this together. Use every resource, every connection, every advantage we have, and we win because losing isn't an option." "When did you become so fierce?" His hand settled at her waist, holding her close. "The moment I married you." She kissed him soft and certain. "You made me brave, Dominic. Showed me I was strong enough to survive in your world. Now let me prove it." Friday brought an unexpected development. Kane appeared with information that changed everything. "Boss, we found the leak. Marcus Ricci. He's been feeding information to the Morettis for 3 weeks." The name hung in the air like a death sentence. Marcus had been with the organization for 15 years, trusted, reliable part of the inner circle. "Bring him in." Dominic's voice was flat emotionless, in the way that meant someone was about to learn what happened to traitors. But when Marcus arrived, escorted by Kane and 3 armed guards looking more defeated than defiant, the story that emerged was more complicated than simple betrayal. "They have my daughter." Marcus's voice broke on the words. "Gabriella. She's 16. They took her 3 weeks ago, said if I didn't feed them information, they'd kill her. I'm sorry, boss. I'm so sorry, but she's my baby girl and I couldn't—" He collapsed into sobs, the kind of desperate grief that couldn't be faked. Isa felt her heart clench. This was her world now, where men were forced to betray families they'd served for decades because their children were held hostage. Where monsters like Victor Moretti exploited love as ruthlessly as they exploited weakness. "Where is she?" Dominic's voice had shifted, some of the cold fury replaced by something almost human. "Red Hook. Abandoned warehouse district. They move her every few days, but I know where she is now. Please, boss, please. I'll do anything. Give you anything. Just help me get my daughter back." Dominic was silent for a long moment, calculation visible in his dark eyes. Then he turned to Kane. "Coordinate with Torres. I want a team ready in 30 minutes. We're getting Gabriella back." "Dominic," Isa started, but he cut her off with a look. "They took a child, used her as leverage against her father. That crosses every line that exists in our world." His expression was harder than she'd ever seen. "We're getting her back, and then Marcus is going to tell us everything he knows about Moretti's operations. Every weakness, every vulnerability, every piece of leverage we can use." The rescue happened fast, clinical, professional. Dominic left with Kane and 8 men armed and prepared for resistance. Isa waited with Kat, both of them too tense to speak, watching the clock tick past midnight into early Saturday morning. When Dominic returned, he carried a trembling teenage girl wrapped in his jacket. Gabriella Ricci, 16 years old, terrified, but alive. Marcus collapsed when he saw her pulling his daughter into his arms with sobs that echoed through the penthouse. And then Marcus gave them everything. Files, recordings, detailed accounts of Moretti operations that were as illegal as anything the Salvatores ran. Evidence that could bury Victor Moretti if delivered to the right people. "This changes everything." Dominic studied the documents spread across his desk, his expression calculating. "With this we can force a negotiation, not from weakness but from power." "Victor Moretti won't negotiate," Kat pointed out from her position by the window. "He's too proud, too invested in this war. Then we make him understand he has no choice." Dominic looked up, his eyes finding Isa's across the room. "We show him that continuing this conflict destroys both families. That peace is the only option that makes sense." Sunday afternoon brought the message they'd been waiting for. Victor Moretti requested a sit-down. Neutral territory, no weapons, just the 2 bosses and their seconds to discuss terms. "It's a trap." Kane's assessment was immediate, certain. "Has to be. Moretti doesn't do peaceful negotiations." "Probably," Dominic agreed, then turned to Isa. "Which is why you're staying here where it's safe." "Wrong." She stood, moved to stand in front of him with the same determination that had carried her through every challenge so far. "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. This could be an ambush, a setup dangerous in a dozen different ways. I know." She took his hands, held his gaze. "But I'm your wife, Dominic. Your partner in everything. If you're walking into potential danger, I'm walking in beside you. That's not negotiable." He stared at her, clearly torn between his protective instincts and his respect for her autonomy. Finally he exhaled roughly. "Fine. You come. But you stay close to me at all times. You do exactly what Kane tells you if things go wrong, and if I say run, I run, I know." She stretched up to kiss him. "I trust you. Trust that I can handle this too." The meeting was set for Luciano's, a restaurant owned by the Russo family, who maintained strict neutrality in territorial disputes. As they pulled up Sunday evening at 7:45, Isa's heart hammered against her ribs despite her outward composure. Victor Moretti was already there, seated at a private table in the back with his son Julian flanking him. When he saw Issa enter with Dominic, his eyes widened fractionally. "You brought your wife? Unexpected. I go where my husband goes." Issa kept her voice steady, channeling every ounce of strength she possessed. "Especially to meetings that concern our family's future." Something that might have been respect flickered across Victor's face. "Then please sit. We have much to discuss." The negotiation that followed was brutal in its precision. Victor laid out his grievances: territorial encroachments, profit disputes, the escalating violence that was costing both families money and men. He proposed a solution, redrawing territory lines, giving each family clear areas of control with buffer zones managed jointly to prevent future conflicts. And in exchange for this peace, Dominic's voice was carefully neutral. Acknowledgement. Victor's eyes held something that might have been desperation beneath the pride. That the Moretti family is equal to the Salvatoris in power and influence, that we're not subordinate or lesser but peers deserving of respect. The silence stretched taut as wire. Then Issa understood this entire war, all the violence and posturing and threats, had been about pride, about an old man trying to prove his family's worth to a city that had always seen the Salvatoris as the dominant power. "I can agree to that." Dominic's voice cut through the tension. "Equal territories, equal voice in citywide decisions, equal representation in joint ventures. The Salvatores and Morettis as partners rather than rivals." "And your wife?" Julian spoke for the first time, his eyes on Issa with an expression she couldn't quite read. "She remains off limits. No retaliation for the trouble this has caused." "My wife was never a legitimate target." Dominic's voice went cold. "Threatening her was a violation of every code we live by. But if we're declaring peace, then yes, Isadora is off limits, as is your entire family, Victor. Clean slate starting now." Victor extended his hand across the table. "Then we have an agreement." Dominic shook the gesture, sealing promises that would reshape the city's criminal landscape. But Issa noticed something: Julian's expression, relief, mixed with something deeper, something almost envious. "Mr. Moretti." She spoke directly to Victor, surprising everyone at the table. "May I ask what you hope to accomplish by threatening me specifically?" Victor's mask slipped for just a moment, showing the calculation beneath. "I thought you were Dominic's weakness, something I could exploit to force concessions, gain advantage. I was wrong." "You were." She held his gaze steadily. "I'm not his weakness. I'm his strength. The fact that he loves me doesn't make him vulnerable. It makes him fight harder, protect fiercer, think more strategically. You miscalculated." "So I see." Victor's expression shifted to something almost rueful. "You remind me of my late wife, Mrs. Salvatore. She had your fire, your courage. I lost her to this life 20 years ago. It made me forget that strength can come from love, not just from isolation and fear." The words hung between them, heavy with implications about paths chosen and opportunities missed. Then Julian spoke, his voice carrying a weight that made everyone turn. "Father, I need to tell you something. Something I've been hiding because I was afraid you'd see it as weakness." Victor's attention shifted to his son, wariness in his eyes. "What is it?" "I've been seeing someone for 2 years. Rebecca Brennan from the Brennan family. I kept it secret because I thought you'd disapprove, thought you'd see my caring for someone as the vulnerability you always warned against." Julian's hands clenched on the table. But watching Mrs. Salvatore tonight, seeing how she stands beside Dominic as an equal, I understand now. Love doesn't make us weak. It gives us something worth fighting for, makes us better, stronger, more human. Victor went very still, his expression cycling through shock and understanding and something that might have been pain. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "You kept this from me for 2 years because you thought I'd disapprove." "Yes." Julian met his father's eyes. "Because every lesson you taught me said emotion was liability, that caring too much would get me killed. But it's also made me into something cold and isolated, something I don't want to be anymore." The silence that followed was profound. Then Victor did something Issa never expected. He reached across the table and gripped his son's shoulder. "I was wrong." The admission seemed to cost him something essential. "I let your mother's death turn me bitter, made me believe that feeling nothing was safer than risking everything. But look what it cost me, 2 years of knowing about someone who makes my son happy. 2 years of pushing you to be as lonely as I've been." He looked at Dominic and Issa, his expression stripped of all pretense. "You've built something rare, Mrs. Salvatore, a partnership that makes you both stronger. Don't let this world corrupt that. Don't make the mistakes I did." "We won't." Issa's voice was steady, certain. "We're each other's strength, not weakness. And anyone who tries to use our love against us will learn that the hard way." Victor's smile was tired but genuine. "I believe you. Peace then. True peace. The Morettis and Salvatores as equals, as partners. And your family, both of your families, remain untouched. This war ends tonight." They shook hands again, this time with something closer to respect than mere strategic necessity. As they left Luciano's, Issa felt tension she'd been carrying for weeks finally release. In the car, Dominic pulled her close, his face buried in her hair. "You saved us tonight. You and your courage and your refusal to be seen as anything less than my equal. We saved each other." She laced her fingers with his, felt their wedding bands pressed together. "That's what partners do." 6 months later, Issa stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse watching the sun set over Manhattan in shades of amber and rose. Her hand rested on the small bump that had started showing 2 weeks ago, still subtle enough that loose clothing concealed it but unmistakable when she stood like this in just one of Dominic's shirts. Life had settled into something approaching normal, though normal in their world looked different than most people's version. She still worked as Dominic's executive assistant, though she'd also taken on the role of COO for his legitimate business operations, applying her strategic mind to expansion projects and acquisitions. The federal investigation had quietly disappeared, evidence conveniently lost, and witnesses suddenly unavailable, the kind of outcome that happened when enough political favors were called in. Footsteps behind her announced Dominic's arrival, before his arms came around her, hands settling over hers on the bump they'd discovered together just 3 days ago. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Salvatore?" "Everything. How 6 months ago I was terrified we wouldn't survive the week. How now we're bringing a baby into this world, your world, and I'm somehow less afraid than I've ever been. Less afraid because you know we'll protect this child with everything we are." His hand splayed protectively over her stomach. "Because peace has held, territories are stable, and our families are strong." The doorbell chimed, announcing Catalina's arrival for their weekly dinner. She swept in with her usual energy, followed by Paolo and an unexpected guest, Julian Moretti, with a woman Issa recognized from society pages as Rebecca Brennan. "Hope you don't mind extra." Kat breezed into the kitchen. "Julian called this morning, said he and Rebecca were in the neighborhood." The dinner that followed would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. Salvatores and Morettis and Brennans sharing wine and laughter, discussing business ventures and upcoming weddings and the strange peace they'd all built together. Marcus Ricci stopped by briefly, Gabriella with him, the girl healthy and in therapy, slowly recovering from her ordeal. As Issa watched them all, she felt something settle in her chest. This was her family, now complicated, dangerous, bound by ties of blood and choice and strategic alliance, but also real, protective, fierce in their loyalty to each other. "We're having a baby," she announced during dessert, unable to keep the secret any longer. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Kat shrieked with joy, demanding details. Paolo congratulated Dominic with the kind of backslapping enthusiasm that made them both wince. Even Julian offered genuine happiness, Rebecca beside him glowing with her own news of a recent engagement. Later, after everyone left, Dominic found Issa back at the windows, staring out at the city that had witnessed their entire journey. 6 months ago, jealousy made me storm a restaurant and claim you in front of strangers. Best decision you ever made." She turned in his arms, looked up at the man who'd changed her entire world. "Without question." He kissed her, soft and certain and full of promise. "You and me against the world, Isadora. Always." She pressed her hand over his where it rested on their baby. "Forever. Until our last breath." The city sprawled below them, vast and indifferent and full of dangers they'd learned to navigate together. But up here in this moment they were simply Dominic and Isadora Salvatore, husband and wife, partners in everything, building a future neither had dared imagine was possible. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.